Ladies and gentlemen, good evening this time. The last time you heard from me was in the morning, and you're all still here. Not only that, but you're all looking fantastic for what is the closing session, but it's going to be a very, very rich one. It's good that you are all still standing because you've managed to work through deliberative democracy, agriculture, Europe in the world, climate narratives, taxation, knowledge, data, and artificial intelligence. So our host for this session, we are delighted to welcome a member of the Reimagine family, one of the founding board members of the organization, Carlos Moedas, who I think at that time was in his incarnation as European Commissioner, and who then took on an enviable job of being the mayor of this wonderful city of Lisbon that is hosting us. And it's so fantastic to be here in the City Hall for this event. If you just look up in the heavens, it really is quite something. So we've had a very, very rich morning and afternoon. I would like to say a special word of thanks and forbearance to those who were managing acoustics in the Lisbon Centre area, because that was challenging, but it worked out very, very well indeed. And I think that there have been a huge number of elements and concrete dimensions that have been addressed and that have responded to the call that Erica made this morning to start working, if you like, on the basis of the elements provided, the methodology provided as well. So now what we're going to do is have the privilege to listen to Carlos, to the mayor, sit back, enjoy that, and I will return in a little while. Please.
Thank you so much, and welcome to Lisbon. I'm very happy to have you all here. Thank you so much, Erica. Thank you so much for being here, and really so long, and a lot of things we did in Brussels. To my dear friends, Graça and Maria João, that are here, and so many friends that I see from Europe. You know, you leave Brussels, but Brussels never leaves you. I feel that every day. And, you know, I love being a mayor, but I do really think about my times in Brussels, because Brussels is so special, and the European Union is so unique, that really, for someone like me that now is a mayor, I feel that link in between Europe and the countries, but especially the cities, is so important. And that was, I wanted to say a couple of words about that. First of all, in a more formal way, Erica, you were very important in my life as a commissioner. Through you, I had the privilege to meet so many times with President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. And actually, I was thinking that we had dinner with him, with our friend Lamassoure, with Angel Gurria, just a couple of months before his passing. And you know, I remember so well that dinner and how he was so alive and telling me, look, about cities and about ideas and the lack of ideas in Europe, the lack of new ideas, as he would put it. And so I think that it's an inspiration. The work that you've done through this amazing idea of Reimagine Europa on the basis of a man that really changed Europe. I think that Giscard d'Estaing, for those of my generation, was a mark. There was before him and after him. He was able to be one of these moderate politicians that represented a side of the parliament, but would touch very much also the other side. And being that link, and I really, it is inspiring for me, because today is so difficult in this world. And that's what I want to talk about today in just 10 minutes. You know, today we are here to discuss polarization. And polarization for me is really about two things: rigidity and distance. Polarization happens because we are more and more distant from each other, and because opinions are rigid. And so if you think about it deeply, and if you think about polarization as an issue of rigidity and distance, then you can look at what can we do today to solve that. You can do a lot of things as thinkers, as people that work in Brussels, but for me as a mayor, and what is the importance of that? And what I feel in my everyday life as a mayor in this amazing city is that cities are the perfect platform to change that. You know, so I'm positive, I'm a positive person. So instead of looking at polarization and saying, look, there's nothing we can do about it, and social networks and the digital, I feel that I can do a lot about it. And I can do a lot about it because cities are the center and the platform to fight polarization in politics and in democracy. And why do I think that? Because instead of rigidity, we have diversity. And if you are a city that invests in diversity, you are exactly going in the right way. You are avoiding this rigidity of the world of today, the rigidity of ideas, because it's in the cities that you can confront different ideas and that you can put people talking, as I do so many times in this room, people that normally would not talk. Second, distance. Emmanuel Ram was the mayor of Chicago. He used to say that being a mayor was about 3 I's: intimacy, impact, and immediate. People want things to change immediately. People want things to have impact in their lives, but more than ever, people need some intimacy, that proximity that you can have as a mayor. And that's why if you look at the polls and if you look at every research, today people believe in mayors. I mean, mayors are the political job that people feel a little bit more close to. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Of course, there's good mayors and bad mayors, but people feel and trust mayors. And so I think that from a distance of being a commissioner at the European level, I feel that I can do something about it. And so from a very first day of being a mayor, what I wanted was to create this link with Europe. Because I believe that today the link of Europe with the nations is weak. But the link of Europe with cities is strong. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is that if I'm a national politician, I have every reason to blame Europe. It's very easy for me. I can even win votes, and we saw that in a lot of countries. If you are a mayor and you are invited to go to Brussels, you feel privileged. You feel important. Europe is dealing with you, a simple and local politician. And so I'm a believer that we can do much more if we create that relationship and if we do that intimacy in between the European project and then at the local level. And let me tell you just a couple of points on my experience of how I did it and how I feel that you as a team and you as a lot of people that think about these problems, how we can make it. I think that distance today with Europe is created by the fact that people do not understand what Europe is and what Europe does. That's the reality. I mean, I'm on the street. I'm talking to people every day. And so if I talk about climate change or if I talk about GDPR, people don't really know what it is. But the cities, we can translate that knowledge in those policies in very simple things. So when I was as a commissioner, we worked a lot with Maria da Graça Carvalho on a project that was to create these missions of Europe. And these missions was an idea we developed with Mariana Mazzucato of getting what we say in Europe closer to the ground. And we had this amazing idea of some of the missions, and one of those was a mission of having at least 100 cities in Europe that are carbon neutral by 2030. It's a huge challenge. It's basically 20 years before 2050, as you know. And today in Lisbon, we were selected as one of those cities. And I understood the difficulty of that job, the difficulty of translating an idea that nobody on the ground understands, which is basically to be carbon neutral. The guy in the shop next door, they don't know what's that. But then my idea was to say, look, let me do it in a way that people understand. So the first measure we created was to have public transportation for free for the young and the elderly. So today, if you are younger than 23 or 65 or plus, you don't pay public transportation. And that was magic. It was magic because people felt, sometimes a lot of people still on the street come to me and they say, thank you for that. And I say, look, what you're doing, you are doing what we have to do to reduce emissions. So it's a carbon neutral measure. And people say, so if I don't pay the bus, is it good? And I say, yeah, so that's what you do. And suddenly you transform this kind of like very vague, very macro idea of carbon neutral into something that is very clear for people. And that for me was really life-changing, even in terms as a politician of giving that to people. And secondly, we started looking at water. And we said, look, we spend in this town hall 4 million euros in water, in payment for drinkable water every year. And then we said that this is really stupid because 75% of the water we use is not to drink. So we are wasting water that is drinkable, and we can do it differently. So when we had the visit of the Pope, and we had to have 30 hectares of land to receive, everybody was 1.5 million people coming to Lisbon, we decided, let's try to do it differently. Let's use the wastewater treatment plant water that is not drinkable, and basically it's a waste, to basically water the grass of that place. And then we started cleaning the streets with water that you cannot drink. And again, people, they understand what you mean by that. And so I think that if you look at that translation of the European policies into the ground, then you reduce friction, because what you suffer today, and I see that every day in the city, is a friction in society. And that friction is because these ideas that we have are not clear for people. And so if you put it clear, you can really change things. Then, when I was a commissioner, we developed this idea on innovation to have a European Innovation Council. Again, it was a great idea, 10 billion in Horizon Europe for companies and for startups and for scale-ups. And I came to Lisbon asking to people, look, did you know about the European Innovation Council? And people said, no, we don't know about the European Innovation Council. And I said, look, so let me communicate that in a different way. And so I started talking about unicorns. And people started laughing, because it's laughable. I mean, like, you know, this guy wants to be mayor and wants unicorns to come to the city. And suddenly we came with this idea of a unicorn factory that was, again, a translation of a European policy into a local policy. And with that unicorn factory, started attracting people and companies to come to the city. And in 2 years, against all odds, in a country that has only produced 7 unicorns, 7 of these big companies, I mean, sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small, we know, sometimes they go up, they go down, but in general, we attracted 12 unicorns to the city. And people came because they felt, look, there's an ecosystem, there's diversity, there's creativity, and so we can stay in this amazing city of Lisbon. And in 2 years, we made it with more than 54 companies coming to town. And I think that if you look at most of these policies, they always relate to Europe. But just finishing with 2 points that I think are so important for also our discussion of polarizing. If you want to really depolarize and create a democracy, and basically to protect democracy, there's one thing that you have to focus today as a politician. Whatever you're from the right or from the left, you have to focus on social policies. And social policies today in cities are the biggest difficulty that we have. Housing and health. And if you think that Europe will give a solution, or the national welfare state will give a solution, you're dead. You have to do it at the local level. And so, thanks to the European money and to the Next Generation Europe, we could have more than 500 million to build new houses in Lisbon at affordable rents. And I think that, of course, it doesn't solve all the problem, but really helps solving the problem. So being a mayor and being a moderate politician, which, by the way, I think is the most difficult thing you have today, is to be moderate. I was just in a meeting before with the Minister of Interior, because we have 2 rallies this weekend that are difficult things for us to manage, because there can be some extremism. Portugal is a very moderate country. Unfortunately, we have 2 situations that we have to control. And I was saying, look, to be a moderate politician is really difficult, because if you are on the extremes, you have your tribe. I don't have a tribe. I mean, I just want to do good. And so I keep like people pushing me from one side and saying bad things about me on one side, on another side, when you have to have the courage to be in the center and defend people in the center. Because if you go to the extremes, you destroy the system, and the costs of destroying the system are huge compared to the cost of not destroying the system. And that's what I'm worried every day, is that the polarization of the extreme political parties to the left and to the right are creating situations of friction and breaking the system. And so every 6 months, we do an experience of participation of the people of Lisbon, where we have in this room 50 people that are selected randomly. They're not from an association, they're not from a political party, they're not from a union, and they come here and they basically build the city with us. They come with ideas, and then I tell them, look, ideas is very easy to have. So come with the ideas, and then you come and you stay for 6 months with us, giving your spare time to do those ideas and to build those ideas. And that's why we're starting to have this big, every weekend we close parts of our neighborhood so people can walk without cars, with the kids. That was one idea that came from the citizens. We just planted last year, in between 2022 to 2023, with the people of Lisbon, we planted more than 100,000 trees in green in the city. And those are the things that I think are exciting about the discussion that you have here today and tomorrow, and I'll be very happy to participate as much as I can in your discussions, is how can we be aggressively moderate? How can we be the ones that are activists of moderation? How can we create a place where people are not just against you or for you, that people listen to you and they respect your ideas, and that everybody is what they want to be? I mean, I always say, yesterday I was with a lot of people from other countries that live in Lisbon, and I say, look, if you come to Lisbon, you are Lisboeta. I don't care where you're coming from. I don't care. I don't care what's your religion. I don't care where you are and where you come. I love that you come. And with that, you create the city and you create a better world. But of course, these days, this seems for some of us a dream, because a lot of the things that we're going through are so difficult in society. So welcome again. I hope that with the hand of Maria João and Graça, and so the panel will be much better than I am, but I felt that I wanted to tell you something a little bit also from the heart. In this magnificent room, just so you know, where the Portuguese Republic was created in the 5th of October 1910. And the Republic is a woman. She's behind me with a similar 5th of October 1910. On that morning, Republicans came. They came into this room. They went into the balcony, and they changed the regime forever. So 1910 was the year where everything changed in Portugal, and it was exactly in this beautiful room. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the night.
Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for that testimony, because what we're all looking for is not just ideas, but the translation of dreams into realities. And to hear you be so uplifting in what you've been able to do here in Lisbon. I said it's an enviable job, and I think what you've just said now probably makes it even more enviable than that. And I remember from my time at the OECD, the importance of the level of mayors in policy action has grown exponentially. Having examples, very concrete examples about public transport, about water, these are very helpful to us as well, because they're the things that people can understand. This morning we had a session on deliberative democracy, and we were talking about the need to bring random selection of people. You're already doing it. So in that sense, much of what we're discussing in the event is taking place in the city, which makes it all the more appropriate. So thank you very much. We now move to the closing panel segment of this event on narratives, emotions, and polarization. And here we have a unique opportunity to delve into that intricate interplay between those elements, the narratives, the emotions, and the growing divide within our societies that we have been hearing about. Now, as we navigate this complex terrain, it's crucial to recognize that the power of these narratives in shaping perceptions, beliefs, and ultimately in shaping our actions. And to delve a little bit further into this, we're sorry that you can't be with us in person, Manuel, but we're delighted to have one of the mainstays of Reimagine, Professor Manuel Castells, who is a world-renowned sociologist, specialist in communications, member of the Reimagine Europa Advisory Board, and former minister in the Spanish government. Despite this geographical distance, Professor Castell's work on contemporary society transcends borders. So let's hear you transcend that now, that distance. Welcome, Manuel.
Thank you. Do you hear me? Yes. You hear me? Okay. That's the only important thing. So, good evening, all of you. Let me first thank Reimagine, and particularly my dear friend Erika, for inviting me to be with you today. It's an honor. And I also like very much to be with my Portuguese friend in my favorite city, in Lisbon. You know that Portugal, and particularly Lisbon, is always in my heart, those of you who know me, and for many years. So that's particularly moving and interesting. So let's go to try to discuss somewhat, briefly, very briefly, what is really happening around the issue of political and ideological polarization, which is one of the main incredible tasks that Reimagine Europe has taken up. Let me start from the broader picture. We know that our world and our lives are being shaken by several major crises that are in the minds of everybody. So I will not insist in this crisis. But the most serious crisis is the crisis of crisis management, meaning that we increasingly are losing the political and institutional instruments to manage all these crises, because the institutions and the political systems have widely lost the trust of citizens. All the data are there. This is worldwide. This is anywhere. So this is the critical point, because if we cannot develop policies, however good would be, in somewhat of consensus with citizens, it's not going to work, because these policies are difficult. We have to dare to address the fundamental issues with a number of policies that are going to increasingly challenge the way we live and the way we are. So this can only be done with the trust of citizens. And for the moment, this is not the case. There are good exceptions, fortunately, but this is not the general case. The result of this situation is the rise of undemocratic and ultimately destructive policies all over the world, in many cases with the support of the majority of citizens. And that's the critical point. It's not that there are extremist forces. There always have been. The problem is that extremist forces are winning predicament and support among large segments of the population in every country. Remember, I always mention, Hitler came to power elected by the majority of German citizens. So it's not the putsch that we have to fear, it's the subversion of the democratic order from inside the democratic societies. Some examples. A country as important as Argentina is very important in every aspect. They are selected with 56% of the vote a deranged man who assures that he talks with his dog, I mean his dead dog, every day. And that refers to the complete challenge to everything that is respectable and democratic. In the United States, where I live part-time, all the polls in the last month, in the critical stage, those that really decide the vote in the Electoral College, are all, in all of these polls, Trump is way ahead, which if the election would be today, clearly Trump would win by a large margin. And I will not elaborate on what that means for America, for Europe, for the world. So still not done. Our last hope is Taylor Swift, which shows the transformation of politics in our time. If we don't mobilize the young people, we will lose. And the young people cannot be mobilized by politicians, absolutely not. In the United States, at least at this point. So, and in Europe, you all know that in every country, extremist forces are winning ground. And if we don't reverse the trend, it's highly likely that the next European Parliament will have a blocking group of members of Parliament that will be anti-European. And this is the real situation today. And this is what then makes it very difficult to manage the crisis, and therefore the fundamental crisis is the political crisis. Reasons for that? Well, a number of circles, some particular political circles, blame social media. Is that true? Well, yes and no. Let me explain. Fake news and disinformation and manipulation, particularly now using deep fake with the powerful tools that artificial intelligence is providing, have absolutely increased. But not only because of Russian trolls, but because everybody's trolls, everybody uses trolls, everybody. And therefore, there is substantial disinformation and manipulation. But after studying the matter for quite a while, I can say that this is clearly a factor that amplifies the polarization in society, but by no means is the cause. It is very important to say it amplifies, because something that is potentially damaging then becomes very damaging. But we know that the most polarized groups in society increase their visibility by the use of social media. But it's not exactly because of the social media that this extends to society. Let me give you one particular number. In the last 2 decades, polarization, political ideology, has increased dramatically in all the countries, but has increased mainly and more than proportionally in the older group of the population, above 60, 65 years old. depending on countries. Exactly those who use internet the least. I think this is something extremely telling. Second, political neuroscience has established that people believe or look for information that reinforces what they already think. In terms of they read the newspapers they like, they watch the television program they like, they join the social media groups that they feel at ease. So in other words, they do not look to be informed, but confirmed. And this, again, this is something established by research. So what is important is that we should not discard the amplification process by extreme groups that become much more visible. This is what we call in social science the echo chamber. But again, the roots of the problem are not there, although it is, again, very important. So where this increasing political and ideological polarization of society comes from? I published relatively recently a book, Rupture, the Crisis of Liberal Democracy, where on the basis of the analysis of the rise of Trump, of Brexit, of trends in Europe, particularly in France, in Italy, in Spain, I was able to show which are really the causes empirically. The main issue that overarches everything is that people, large numbers of people, are threatened by, in their interests and values, by the number of social changes that they do not understand and that they do not fully comprehend. It is literally a reactionary movement, in the literal sense of reactionary. It is xenophobia and racism against immigration, and also reaction against something different from immigration, which is the increasing and irreversible multiculturalism of our societies. Remember, when people say, well, France is against immigration, well, France is mainly against the 6 million people from African origin, North Africa, Central Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, that live in France and are born in France, even most of them in third generation. So the worst problem is the problem that we do not recognize. And Europe still has not accepted that the fundamental trend is simply that we are and will be more and more a multicultural, multi-ethnic society. This is not a choice, it's already there. It's a significant segment of the population having in addition more and more children than the rest. So also something that is the rise of defensive nationalism against globalization perceived as a threat and against the co-national institutions like the European Union that are perceived as agents of globalization rather than defenses against the unwanted consequences of globalization. It's also what in the United States called the angry white male, reacting against the crisis of patriarchalism because of the rise of women's rights, LGBT rights, and refusing that world. The majority of voters for Trump in his election, in every election, the large majority are white men. Without white men, Trump would not have any chance. But that's the key. And this is not just the working class men that always all the analysts show. Yes, these are the more mobilized men. However, it's all men across classes, including the professional men. Also, people are rejecting the necessary measures that we have to take to mitigate climate change. Look at France these days, partly because Yes, yes, maybe the planet, but what about me? What about my family? What about my survival? And second, because they believe this is unfairly distributed. So not all the population, not all the segments of the population are having the same consequences in their daily life. And therefore, there's also this on the background of rampant social inequality everywhere, which exacerbates, in addition, with the crisis of the welfare state, exacerbates the aggravation of the lower classes. And yes, more than that, fear of technological change. Is absolute panic about artificial intelligence nowadays. And ultimately, the calling into question of truth, of all truth, and particularly of science, which has been the basis for the progress of our civilization, as it was shown in the widespread anti-vaccine movement. So, faced with this fundamental crisis of trust and legitimacy in the public institutions, we cannot simply proceed with fact-checking, because even if we check the facts don't permeate the barrier to defense against the facts. And it's not enough to denounce extremism. We are not an Antifa movement. We should be able to really talk to all the segments and groups in society which are reacting in this way. They are citizens, they are people. So we have to talk to them. To talk to them saying what? Well, we have, yes, to propose ways of social, economic, and ecological reconstruction, but trying to reach as much as possible a consensus with people at large. Demagogy cannot be fought with a new enlightenment, but with policies as accurate as possible, rooted in more democratic politics, in every sense that we can enlarge democracy: deliberative, grassroots, direct relationship, and of course within the context of the parliamentary democracy of political parties. We cannot throw away political parties because these are the basis of the democratic institution, but it's clearly not sufficient. Why I can say that? Because we observe what is happening. So Erika comes to the rescue, and she has built, grounded in observation, a very precise, rigorous model of polarization and depolarization that certainly includes the intervention in the social media, of course, because the deep fake of disinformation is becoming very dangerous. But her model calls for specific forms of engaging with society at large. And I will not develop the mechanism because she has presented and because you have it and you can discuss it. I would simply insist that this will be a long, difficult, and complex process. But I believe, Reimagine has a guideline. And that's the way that we could proceed. Because in fact, this is our last hope, and I'm serious about that, of avoiding the disintegration of Europe from the inside, and even to avoid the impossibility of humans to live together. After all, war, blood, and tears are the dominant experience of the human history. So we should deconstruct hopes rather than waiting for Rousseau. Thank you.
Manuel, thank you very much for a very sobering presentation that was a very interesting counterpoint as well with the testimony that we heard from a a more local space here in Lisbon. And that just goes to show that there are different vantage points and different perspectives from which we need to look at the issues that we have to grapple with. And on that note, I'm delighted that we have with us representatives from some very interesting vantage points institutionally. This panel that we're going to move into now will allow us to look at these questions from the perspective of parliaments, from the perspective of nation states, from the perspective of supranational institutions, and from the perspective of universal global institutions. So I'm going to invite our panelists to join me now. Let me begin with Maria de Graça Carvalho. She's a member of the European Parliament. Please join me in welcoming her. Next up is Erika Kohler, who's a strategic advisor at the Europe Department of the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Then we have Mario Schaafbilik. Mario is a science policy advisor at the Joint Research Centre, the European Commission. Now, all three of you are European, and I'm delighted that we are able to mix that with a perspective from further afield. Heriberto Tapia, he's the head of the research team at the Human Development Report Office of the United Nations Development Programme. Heriberto is from Chile. So I think we're going to be able to hear in succession, and what I suggest, I don't plan to stand here while all of you make your presentations. I think you're going to have the freedom, and if you want to exchange between each other, please do so. I know that, Maria Graça, you're going to take the perspective obviously from the European Parliament, and we have this is a year of elections. One of the most important elections certainly is the European election of 27 member states that is very close down the line. So hearing about narratives, emotions, and polarization in that context is going to be fascinating. Erika, the perspective of a nation state, but I had a little conversation with you over lunch, and you're not just any diplomat, so I think you should also talk a little bit about those experiences that you're having beyond that world, notably with the private sector in looking for some really novel solutions. Mario, European Commission, I used to be there, and I think the JRC is one of the most exciting parts of that institution. So we hope very much to hear uplifting elements from you there, because I know there's fantastic work that you've been doing with another of my former organizations, the OECD. And last but not least, Heriberto, I was a big fan of the Human Development Report, and one of the things I was proudest of at the OECD is coming up with the Better Life Index to try and get people to move beyond GDP. So again, super perspective I think that we can hear from Heriberto. I'm going to leave you to it, and at the end of your contributions, we'll see if you have questions from the audience. So if you do, please be thinking about that, because we'll have an opportunity for you to chime in. Maria Graça.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you to Mayor Carlos Moedas. It's a pleasure to be here. In the fantastic, is my city. I was not born here, but I have studied and lived here. I was born in a small town, the same town as Carlos, in Beja. For the ones that are not Portuguese, it is in Alentejo. And I had the privilege to be a friend and to have collaborate a lot with Carlos. And let me tell you that is a safe haven in a very troubled times that we are going through. So to be here in a city that is so well managed, and in certain way, the way Carlos has managed the city is a bit of the evidence that I'm going to try to defend in my short speech today. And I just want to also congratulate Lisbon and Carlos Moedas for the recent prize of the capital of innovation. Lisbon is the capital of innovation, and I'm very proud. No one has thought about it 2 years ago, but with a lot of work, we are a very important prize that Europe distinguish our city. And it's very nice that we are known by innovation, research. It was not like that some years ago. Portugal was not known by the technology, but people like Carlos and others has transformed the vision that the rest of Europe has from our country in general and from our city and particularly. And why do I say that in certain way the way Carlos managed the city is going to, one of the examples that I'm going to defend here tonight. This conference is about polarization, and you have been discussing agriculture, the fight against climate change, democracy, the populism, the extremists, and in my view, the answer, the way to give solutions to all the questions that we have been raising and that are stated in the program and the document that supports this conference is exactly the moderation, but to have decisions that are evidence-based, that are science-based, that have knowledge and that have ethical principles. And if you put all this together, you find the solutions for these problems. I always believed in my life, in my academic life, but also in my political life, I use the same approach. I analyze the situation, I studied, I gather the data, I draw scenarios, I look at the ethical implications of the possible decisions, and after I try to come up with solutions. And look at one of the subjects that is news today, agriculture. I think that we still have a lot of problems in agriculture because we have, as a community, European but also worldwide, we have not invested enough in scientific development for agriculture. And in order to combine the different requirements from the consumers want healthy products, wants products that do not have pesticides, fertilizers, but for the producers, for the agriculture, the sector is very difficult to produce without these because there is no replacement, easy replacement, economic replacement for this substance. And there is proof, scientific proof that there are problems for the environment, for the health of this substance. So we need to do much more research in this area. We have done in the past research in areas where we solve the question. I usually say that something in my field of expertise in the academia, that is the air pollution. We have managed to solve, not yet the climate change, but the air pollution, to reduce particles, to reduce NOx, to reduce what pollutes the air we have done a tremendous advancement in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s. It would have been impossible to live in cities like Lisbon, in London. London was a terrible city until it was cleaned, because all the combustion were much cleaner due to a huge investment in research. So I believe I'm a true believer in science together with ethics. I'm a true believer on the network society, and I would like, very nice to see Manuel Castells. When I was working with President Barroso, he helped a lot designing the EIT, the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, with the network society. So with working in the network society, with the new technologies, I'm a deep fan of the new technologies with artificial intelligence. I'm not afraid of artificial intelligence. It's going to be a very important change in our lives, in the lives of our industry, of our companies, our day-to-day life, because the ethical principles are going to be there, like they were there in the genetics, like we're there in the nuclear area. What would be the genetics and the health research and the nuclear research if we didn't have ethical principles? We have all of the researchers, all the users of this research are profoundly based on ethical principles. So AI is going to be very beneficial, is already very beneficial, for example, in the health sector, to detect tumors in the skin cancer, in helping analyzing every picture in health diagnosis. So AI is going to be a fantastic tool. It's going to change our life like the internet and the mobile phone has changed our life, because it's going to be based on ethics, and we need to believe on that. Now, to finalize, what about European Parliament and what will happen in the elections? I think that we all have to pass one message. All the extremist groups, they don't contribute to any solution. When they are in Parliament, they are there to speak or to shout or to do big speeches to the media and in the plenary. But they don't do a report. They don't do amendments to improve reports. They don't vote in favor most of the reports. They are usually against. They are against the research and innovation programs. They are against the recovery and resilience plan that has helped our society to come out of the crisis. So they don't contribute to solutions. They are against science. Recently, they have organized a conference in the European Parliament against vaccines. They are against vaccines. Can you imagine? How can someone be against vaccines that are so important and has contributed to a better health in our world? So we need to spread this fact that they don't contribute to any solutions at European level. So I hope that we are able to pass this message, and that they will continue to be minority groups, and that the ones that believe in science, in evidence-based, in ethics, and good solutions will have the majority, that we continue to develop good policies for Europe that have an impact in the world. Thank you very much.
I feel very guilty to keep you from your dinner, so I'll try to be brief. And it's an honor to be here, and a wonderful place, not only historic, but also very innovative indeed. We do see Lisbon in the whole of Europe now, and we really see the factory of innovation, those kind of initiatives that do make a big change. And I also admire what Reimagine Europe does with the polarization method that you're building. You're really trying to build something here. And also we talked to Martin and also, yes, Andre, we did this exercise this afternoon in the workshop on climate initiatives, and this was taken as a case to see what can we do on polarization, because climate will face a lot of polarization, as you showed us. And it was so interesting to see that it boils down to empathic listening. And also, Martin, you asked the question, and I thought about it, you know, what about institutions? Can they be seen as, well, can they empathically engage with citizens? And, you know, it brings to me the thought that institutions are actually solidified emotions, maybe. In the European Union, the UN, they all came out of this urge of, you know, never again we want war, we want harmony. And so actually they're solidified, and that's the problem also, because for some people, they are solidified emotions that people reject. So for us here, I think we are aware that there are all these different values, and I do a lot with that in my personal capacity with the spiral dynamics movement, where we see, just like you, 7 or 6 or a number of groups that really hold different values as their most important ones, and we have to understand that we have to understand all of them. We have to include all of them, and that's probably what Reimagine Europe really sets, what sets you apart from many other organizations, that you're trying not to be in your own bubble. Because we all tend to be in our bubbles and think that the world is that which we see. And I would like to end with a little story of, because we are emotional animals, rationalizing, right? We're story animals. So I'll tell you a little story about a talk I told Karen this morning with my little 12-year-old Giuseppe. Well, he's not called that way, but in our exercise this afternoon, there was a little 12-year-old gaming Giuseppe. I have one of those at home. And we had a problem a week ago. He had not locked his bike for 2 weeks, and it was almost stolen. It was already being taken away. And I was mad with him. I was like, your bike could have been stolen, and you know, I'm not getting you a new one, and you should lock your bike. This is a very Dutch problem, by the way. And he was irritated about something else, and he was not going to say sorry. And then I was like, okay, well, you don't have to say sorry, but you shouldn't do this again. And then we got into this fight, sort of into this, well, who's going to give up first, right? You recognize this, those among you who have children. And then he said something important. He said, well, I'm not going to say anything. I want to win. I was like, okay, that's interesting. So if you win this fight, then I will lose. I don't want to lose either. So how are we going to solve this? And I said, well, you know, if we want a loving relationship and we want to continue, then we should both not win or lose. We should both win, something like that. And, you know, then, yeah, that was a very fundamental thing we talked about there, I think, because it was about love and not winning at the detriment of the other. And that's probably the essence of empathic listening, that you're trying not to win, but you're trying to really listen and then build something together. And that's what Europe is great at. We have a lot of ideas, and we should build things. We should start doing. And Mr. Mayor, that's what you're doing here. That's great to see, and I think we have it in every country. We have great ideas. We don't have raw materials. We don't have a lot of defense. We don't have our own energy. But if we can get things right in the coming years by just getting into the action, getting green hydrogen, as I talked to Anthony, here to Europe in the form of solid salt instead of dangerous ammonia, etc. If we can use these patents that we have already, if we can put them to use and we can build coalitions of companies that decide together that we can do this, then we will be energy independent in a few years' time, which will make us more independent, first thing, but also more interesting for other countries, because then we can pass on these great ideas and we can, also promote multilateralism, because that's what Europe is for. We're there to hold the middle ground between this, extreme collectivism in China and extreme freedom in the US. We're about the balance. We're about getting things done together, the win-win. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and very uplifting words, very good. Also would like to thank Reimagine for inviting me here to this beautiful place, wonderful conference today, also yesterday, on this satellite event where we also tried your reframe methodology and played, I was an eco guardian and had to defend nature against the evil quantum technologists. But okay, that's a story for another time. Also, I have to say, the last time I've been in Lisbon was 15 years ago as a student, and this shows me this pleasure of a city that at the same time manages to move forward, advance, and stay the same in the feeling when you come back. So wonderful to be here. Now I feel challenged by Anthony to say something uplifting as well, and we already heard this doom presentation, a little bit of polarization and what's going to happen in the coming months. But I will try. I'll try to fulfill this. I work for a unit that has a very pretentious title. That's namely Science for Democracy and Evidence-Informed Policymaking. So all in one, like we can solve everything. But it also, we chose this title ourselves because we believe in these two things going together. We do not believe that scientists are the better politicians, even though scientists think that themselves very often. We believe, though, that democracy without evidence-informed policies is doomed to fail. I mean, we heard the speech, only if we know what we're doing and we know what we're basing our policies on, do we progress, and we're not turning in ideological circles and reverting every time to after every election to the same policies before, and thereby just destroying progress. So we believe in this, but we say evidence-informed policymaking. Why? Because we also see that evidence is always only an ingredient into the way we design policies, because ultimately the evidence cannot determine what is the one best policy. It has no normative guideline for this. And therefore we need politicians like you who will represent then the choice that can be made based on the best scientific evidence. And we have this funny task on top of this in our unit of trying to scientifically understand the diversity of values and opinions and attitudes and identities that lead them to vote either for you or for someone else. And that's what we try to develop a little bit of an intelligence behind this. Excuse me. and that's where I now try to come back to the previous talk. Namely, when we talk about polarization, there's a lot of doom and gloom out there, especially in the media. We know media loves to make it negative. You click on it, you want to read it. It's kind of an addiction. But we know that at least part of this polarization nowadays is based on a misconception. It's based on a misconception of what other people think about us. And there are studies out there that show basically we hate the other group because we think they hate us more than they actually do. Just kind of ironic. And once you give them, the people in these studies, the information, well, they're actually not hating you so much. then we are suddenly open to, okay, well, perhaps I should listen to what they think and want to do and believe. And I think this goes in the same direction as your methodology that you presented today, which gives then a better handle on how to do that in practice when you are face to face. But ultimately, this is one of the messages that I want you to take away, is that do not be discouraged by the belief that we have such big gulfs that we cannot overcome. No, it's not true. This is the picture that we are painting ourselves, that we are getting painted. I'm just using this because I see these pictures here. But it's not necessarily the reality. And if we are able to move to others, ask others, listen to others empathetically, then we are also able to understand we may have something in common that we want. We may not want exactly the same thing because we are different, but we may find a common solution here. So that's one of the important messages, I think, for today that we also learned during this conference here. And then I want to comment on 3 prominent things that I heard during the conference today. And that is solutions to this polarization that we're facing in society. And one was, we need more education. Now, education is good, don't misunderstand me. We know that education has very positive benefits for everyone in many dimensions. And things like media literacy are great. They have been shown to work in becoming better in deciphering dis and misinformation. However, this is a very tempting answer, because it is usually the other side who needs more education, because we are the experts, of course. So I don't need more education, it's only the others. And also it feeds into this, again, this narrative of a deficit model. It's the others who don't know enough, and that's why they are thinking differently than I do. And not, well, they may know exactly as much as I do, or even more, but they have a different standpoint, a different worldview, different values that drive them to see this evidence and conclude something very different from this. And so, while I support, of course, every call for more education, we shouldn't think too much that we just need to educate everyone and then we are all fine and we all have solved all issues. No, no. There are differences in opinion still remaining, even if we have all the same level of knowledge, I would say. That's the first thing. Second thing was citizen engagement. Citizen engagement, absolutely. I mean, our unit is in favor of this. We work on this. My colleagues in ISPRA have this competence center on deliberative democracy, and we are within the Commission supporting this very strongly. I'm also proud that the Commission has given out the recommendation in December last year of calling for more strategic and structured engagement with citizens, and called on the member states to develop structured models of how to engage citizens more and include them more in the decision making. And I think that's the right way forward. Just a caveat on this, again, if you involve citizens in any kind of, in German you call it Bürgerrat, and we had the conference on the future of Europe in the EU, then you also need to make the recommendations that are coming out of this relevant. Because if you force citizens to sit through several days of boring discussions on policies, and later on nothing happens out of the recommendations, then you're not only not building trust, you're actively losing trust on top of this, for good reason. So if we do citizen engagement exercises, we need to do them right. We need to make them meaningful, so that the outcomes are actually taken on board in the political process. And then the last one, and I think this is coming to this reframing, one of the titles and your methodologies, and I'm a believer in the fact that evidence itself doesn't speak or doesn't do the trick. Scientific facts are wonderful, but they hardly change people's minds or heart. And reframing is a good strategy for this. You have picked within your strategy also carefully saying, try to find the meta-narrative, the one that unites the different opinions, different views, different values, as you also found them. And I can only support this. And I would there again just add as one point that these narratives that we then try to use in the future should also be rooted in evidence, meaning they need to be based on a premise that is true and that can be realized, because otherwise we're just replacing one vision that we don't like with another vision that we like, but if it cannot become true, then in the long run we're also losing further trust. So we need to pick narratives very, very carefully, and we need to do the homework of showing that there is something underneath this, that this narrative can become true, otherwise it doesn't work. And that would be my take-home messages. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. First time in Lisbon, and I'm meeting the mayor. So, no, great. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the things that we are doing in the United Nations Development Program that are pretty aligned with the search for new narratives. The truth is that we are very worried about the current situation, this cycle of distrust, in particular because we have the responsibility to measure development. And right now, we are seeing that development is better than ever. So there is something that we are missing. So therefore, first we're pushing a narrative of listening to people. Because if we are saying that, let's say, the Human Development Index is reaching its highest value in history, and people are feeling increasingly worried, the level of people feeling stress has increased like 10 percentage points over the last decade. People are increasingly sadder, again, like 10 percentage points higher over the last decade. If 6 out of 7 people feel more insecure, there is something that we are not capturing. And if we are not capturing it, then we need to listen to the people, because otherwise, other leaders are going to be doing that job, and maybe with bad consequences leading to populism, for instance. So that's very important. It has to be done with responsibility, but we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be humble. So the second narrative that is very important is a narrative for human security. People are getting more insecure, and we realize that the level of human insecurity is a strong factor behind the process of polarization that we are seeing. Human insecurity is behind the reduction in trust in one another. Human insecurity is behind the percentage of people that are supporting the extreme views. Human insecurity is behind the reduction in the support to democracy. Human insecurity is behind to the increase in the justification of violence as a political means. So there is a big problem there. Something interesting is that this was acknowledged by people long ago. So if we look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the preamble, we see that the main objective is to create human security, which we define like freedom from want, freedom from fear, and freedom to live a life with dignity. So at that time, many years ago, there was this consensus about the importance of human security, and now we have been losing this, this main objective, and it's important to raise it again. As Mario was saying, it's one of these ideas that can be part of our meta-narrative, and it's, for us, it's central to bring it again. Human security also is very connected with agency, because it's a barrier for people to build the lives that they want. And we have seen over the last few years that people are getting more, have been making progress in terms of their some certain well-being indicators, but they have been losing certain agency. They have been losing, some people say, they have been losing the narrative of their lives. And the third point, the third narrative point is about creating narratives to defeat the misperception. And here, Mario already explained very well why this is important. And something that is very relevant when we go to this area of misperceptions is that we want to create a sense of unity. We want to create bridges between different groups. And here we are not being over-optimistic in the sense that it is true that by just giving information to people, we are not necessarily going to defeat some forces of motivated reasoning. However, in many cases, by providing information, we can appeal to the values, intrinsic values of people. Often people don't act necessarily only on the basis of rational considerations. Sometimes people act following what others are doing. And therefore, if we can generate information about the desire of people to come together, I think that can generate the conditions for common action. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Wow, that's quite something. I was taking many notes in the course of that. And there were many concepts. I loved the solidified, or is it solidified emotions? That really speaks to me, having spent time, particularly I would say at the OECD. I think that there's a need to soften up a number of institutions, and I think that, I don't know if Peter shares my view on that, but the fact that there are people like you in those institutions bodes very well. I'd have to say that certainly from my vantage point. Institutions need people who are disruptive. They're not brilliant at tolerating them, and the people have to tolerate the institutions as well. And there is a point at which, you know, you can have too much of a good thing. But fantastic. Now, we're a little bit up against the clock. However, in the same way that I was energized by what I heard now, I'm sure many of you are. And if anybody has comments or burning questions that they would like to pose, please, this is the moment to do so. There are a couple of mics in the room. Don't be too shy, but equally, if you are wowed as I am, then maybe I can't see anyone, and as an auctioneer, I am, oh, Gianluca just came in at the buzzer.
Since others are shy, just very quickly, since one of my last time I was here, I had the pleasure with Maria Grassa, with Commissioner Moedas, we were contributing to the big conference on social innovation, and already at that time, 2017, digital was very high on the agenda of the EU and the Commission. So now it looks like we have a bit lost that track of social innovation. I mean, you mentioned social policy is the key, and we as Europeans, we have, I mean, still, I don't know for how long, luxury to have a welfare state. So, I mean, everybody's talking about AI and data, but maybe what can we do, and what the next Commission, the next Parliament in particular, should do and should put as a priority for the agenda for reimagining Europe.
Who wants to take that? Maria Grassa, do you want to take that on?
It's not an easy one, but it's a fact that we are now discussing in the Parliament, and I suppose the same inside the European Commission, what will be the next deal. We had the Green Deal. So a lot of discussion on industry, on competitiveness, on the production, industry, agriculture, how we can have a sustainable growth that can Europe regain a more economic growth so that we can sustain our social model. That is a lot of discussion. We have, during the last 5 years, put a lot of emphasis on the green transition, and in certain way we didn't probably pay enough attention to the production, to the industry in Europe, to the agriculture in Europe. So I think that will be a very important discussion during the elections, the European elections, and also in the future time. Of course, based on research, based on knowledge, based on the digital data, artificial intelligence, social innovation that we should be always there. And we have now a tremendous capacity of modeling with the network of supercomputers that the European Commission was able to finance in Europe. And I think that all this should be at the service of the creating wealth for the Europeans and the ones that live and study in Europe and live with us. I think that is going to be, and how this is done in harmony with the environment, social harmony, should be our main concern, I suppose. And the report that the European Commission have requested to Mr. Draghi and Enrique Letta goes on that sense. Competitiveness, the new internal market that is focused a lot on the digital market that Enrique Letta is doing, shows that also in the European Commission they are thinking also in this line that we are at least in EPP as one of the major topics for the future.
Ensuring institutional balance, I think Maria wants to get a word in from the side of the Commission.
That is the intention, yes. Thank you. No, I mean, I'm not going to add to this very long and elaborate and great shopping lists you already mentioned of all the things that we should work on. Just to, as a reminder, of course, we have our own thinking caps on of what we should do, but in the end, the next EU as a whole should do also what's based on the election outcome in a way, right? I mean, it's a democracy after all, and we need to respond to what the election says, and not define that ahead of time. I'm just saying that from the perspective, perhaps that's not the common Commission perspective, but certainly my perspective. And then adding the dimension of democracy itself, of course, is a topic that we will not lose as something we need to think about strategically. How can we have a European democracy that seems to speak to the local realities as well? I mean, we have here a mayor now, and that's great, but I think people in Lisbon, people in Berlin, people in Brussels, people in Madrid are not the ones who usually criticize the EU overly much. It's more on other levels that we know this. And I'm going back to school on Monday. I'm presenting the EU back at my home school where I did my high school years. And there the questions are very, very different. They're not asking me about the elements of the Green Deal or the AI Act. They're asking more fundamental questions. And I think we are not yet doing a good enough job of explaining what we're doing even. They don't know what the JRC is. Okay, they don't have to know what the JRC is, but they need to know what we're doing, why we're doing it. And I think so far it hasn't been done enough, and therefore that should be a priority in the next 5 years.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I am very much up against the clock here, so if I don't get ayes, I'm going to carry on. But if I get ayes, okay, I'm getting a signal a little bit like that. So I'm going to take the prerogative. But could you join me in thanking this panel? It's been fantastic. You'll come down. Okay, the show is not over yet. This session, please. This session began with a very eminent European Portuguese, and it's going to conclude with a very eminent European Portuguese, the chairwoman of Reimagine's advisory board, a super amazing European in her own right, We wouldn't have a Lisbon Treaty if it hadn't been for the work of Maria João Rodrigues, and I certainly think that Reimagine benefits enormously from her experience, her wisdom, and I'm pretty sure she had a hand in our landing in Lisbon today. So for the concluding remarks, please join me in welcoming Maria João.
Many thanks, Anthony, for these very kind words. And let me now come up with a conclusion. I must say this is not easy. Huh? After such a rich forum, we could go through the entire day. Look, Europe is in search of direction right now. Europe is in search of inspiration. And that's why I must say I'm so pleased that we decided in Reimagine Europa to locate the annual forum here in Lisbon. As I told you this morning, Lisbon is indeed a place of inspiration. And I hope that you are also feeling the same. So please enjoy this city. But not only for the landscape of the city, for the light of the city, but also for the fact that for different reasons, important decisions regarding European Union were taken here. In fact, the first attempt after the law to have a comprehensive development strategy for Europe, this was called by that time the Lisbon Strategy, putting innovation at the core. Then rescuing the constitutional treaty with the Lisbon Treaty. And I'm so proud that under the leadership of Mayor Carlos Moedas, it was possible to put Lisbon as the capital of innovation. This is a well-deserved label. And I must say that thanks to your creativity today and all the work you could bring with you today, it was possible to reach very interesting conclusions. I would like to underline, first of all, that right now we have different exercises of strategic direction happening right now. One preparing the so-called leaders' agenda to be adopted by the European Council in May. Another one being prepared inside the European Commission to prepare the new phase, the next 5 years. But most of all, the one focusing on the European elections, which should be the big moment involving directly the citizens as setting fundamental choices which will then be negotiated in very intensive weeks immediately after European elections. All these will happen until June. So we are in a very special moment of a new, let's say, big bang for the next phase of the European project. And that's why it's so important that whatever we conclude today will be brought to these channels of decisions, and we'll take care of these. You should be reassured about our way to connect directly with these bodies. Now, the problem we have is the following. In all these exercises of strategic direction, the method notably is to identify the upcoming challenges, to assess pros and cons, to define big priorities, and then to enter into the difficult discussion, the means to deliver these priorities. This is the classical method. The question is this enough? And I believe this is not enough. Because if we really want to have wise decisions, and if we want to deliver them involving citizens, we need to involve citizens from the start. And that's why the method we are trying to test with you and to invent with you is so important. Because we know that in the end, this can only work if we are able to build up a collective story, our collective story for the future. And this is the method we have been testing all of our work, and today again, in the different workshops, Well, I must say that in my, with my hat of chair of the advisory board, I was circulating to the different working groups to get the most I could. And now I will just highlight some of the conclusions. But of course, I'm sure that with Reimagine Europa, we'll have much more detailed and much richer conclusions available soon for all of you. As Erika explained so well, so brilliantly this morning, we are trying to invent a method which is starting, in fact, there are particular steps, but the first one is to listen, is to know how to listen, to understand the others. This is fundamental. And the underlying assumption is that at the end of the day, we can have different opinions, but we belong to the same humankind. We're part of the same humankind. So we need to understand. And then we can start identifying common concerns, common objectives, and with this purpose, we can identify some common priorities. The difference will be there, but in spite of the differences, we can identify common priorities. And once we reach this stage, then we can start together finding concrete solutions for concrete problems, because our work will only be credible if we provide concrete solutions. And like that, yes, we can start building another narrative. So this is the method we are advocating. Now, if in fact behind this there is a major art, which is cognitive art, political art, is the art of, let's say, reframing. Erika also referred to this morning. We can reframe. And when we can reframe, we can find another solution. So let me just illustrate, building on your own work all over the day. The art of reframing. When we start with the current narrative, and then by reframing the narrative, we can start finding out another solution. We started with the big landscape, Europe and the world. And the current narrative is very much doomed with the impression of the risk of European decline. Europe confronted with many threats. So we need to reframe this narrative by putting a stronger focus on what we want to be, we Europeans, in the world in front of us. And we believe, in fact, that Europe can assert itself, not only as a market, which is a big single market, but as a full-fledged political entity with its own values. And behind this, yes, of course, when we have war in our continent, we need to support those who are fighting for these values, and we need to find a solution to overcome the war in Ukraine. By the way, we're taking a big step when we announce that we are going to a larger Europe. We'll prepare a new wave of enlargement. This is a very bold step with many consequences for the European continent. But then we also say, when reframing, that, look, a war like that cannot be won just with us in our continent. We need to build up alliances across the world. We need to be able to bridge with our partners across the world, because in fact we need them to come up with the solutions for global challenges, the climate change, the digital transformation, the sustainable development agenda. And so we can build a lot of common ground, which is necessary to go beyond the traditional rivalry, United States and China. And in the end, we should be able to be an active partner of rebuilding the multilateral system we need for the 21st century. By the way, this year also we have a unique opportunity because we'll have the United Nations Summit of the Future. So we discuss some ideas Europeans should be able to bring to this summit. Then let me give a second example. The working group about agriculture. Well, by the way, very interesting. One of the major conclusions of this group was to say, let's reframe the current narrative, which is dealing with agriculture, the agricultural sector, the common agriculture policy. Let's reframe this by putting the focus on the food system. Because when we start reframing like that, we understand there is really a common concern, which is to provide quality food with sustainable means. This is the interest of consumers, but this also gives a new role to the farmers. And they need to understand they are really appreciated and valued in this new role. They are a small group, but a very important group. And they should be given the means to perform this new role, which is provide quality and sustainable food and taking care of the relationship with nature. So these were many implications, by the way, for the future of the common agricultural policy, but I close the brackets here. Then if we go to the third group, the digital transformation. Well, for the time being, and this was very visible over the last 5 years, we know that if Europe somehow is taking the lead in the green transition, Europe is lagging behind the digital transition. Nevertheless, over the last 5 years, we tried to catch up with the important sequence of legislative measures, with a main concern which was to regulate the digital transformation, and with a particular concern with protecting privacy, personal data, and so on. Look, this is, of course, very important. This is very dear to our heart and our European approach. But we reach a point where we need again to reframe this narrative by saying, yes, regulating is important, but it's not enough. Because there is the other leg, which is exactly about innovation. Europe must go much further in innovation with a very clear argument, is that digital innovation, if this is properly channeled, this can be extremely powerful to address many new needs in health, in education, in environment management, in city management. So we need to come up with an approach which was not just to protect us from the threat of losing control of our data, which is there, let's recognize this, but also need to show the positive side that the digital transformation can bring many new services and goods to meet citizens' needs. But for this, we need to have a proper innovation agenda for the digital transition. And then we came to the hot potato, which is we can have beautiful ideas about green transition, digital transition, but how to finance this? Where are the means? We don't have the necessary means. We don't have the large-scale, long-term means we need to have. And of course, we can borrow, but there is a level, of a limit for this when it comes national debt. More recently, as you saw, we could also start borrowing, joint borrowing at European level. But again, there is a limit. And in the end, we need to back borrowing with taxation. So that's why we have selected the topic of taxation. But the art of reframing. Look, our conclusion was the current narrative about taxation is more about how to share the burden. Of course, this remains extremely relevant. But we can reframe the discussion by starting to ask, what for? Why we need taxation? To pay for what kind of public goods? And public goods to provide it at what level? The local, the national. Sometimes this is Europeans. And so this opens a completely different kind of discussion, because, by the way, we are reaching a moment where some of the public goods we need can only be provided at European level. This is very clear when it comes to climate change, just to give an example. And here we come to the last example I'd like to give, which is about democracy. Because we, Europeans, we are a multi-level governance system. We are a multi-level democracy. So the local, extremely important, the national level, the European level, also extremely important. There is something for sure, that the rule of law is fundamental. This has been part of our current narrative, so we need to go on with this. But here we are in the art of reframing. We are understanding that if we really want to give a future to our democratic systems, we need to find a way to involve citizens much deeper. This is about the role of media, because ultimately media are the infrastructure for democracies to work. But this is really about the way to open dialogue and to conduct democratic debate and decision involving much more citizens. And that's why all our work about narratives, about listening to the others and finding the arguments, can be so important. So my plea, and this is my last message, is that let's go on working together. So Reimagine Europa is happy to host you in different places in Europe. We need people like you coming from so different belongings, incredible experience meeting together in this room. We count on you and many others who could not come, but they are available across Europe. And I would like also to express our gratitude. I'm sure that you can follow me to the entire team of Reimagine Europa, and particularly also to Erika as the CEO. So great work, and I will invite you to give a round of applause to all of them. Thank you.
I have to say, I'm very grateful. They've worked very hard and they deserve the round of applause much more than I do. And now it's time to take all of this, these ideas, this energy that we have had today, and move over to the dinner part, to the social part, continue the conversation, continue to disagree agreeably. And a big thank you to the whole advisory board that have helped so much in making this happen. And a special thank you to our Portuguese members, and of course to the mayor who's hosting us in this beautiful place, and to all of his team as well. So a big thank you to them, and then we can continue with the festivities.